Zagan is the strongest mage with all the fortunes in the world but zero hoes. However, when he attends a shady auction and sees a busty elf on sale, he empties his life's savings to buy her so he can make her his baby mama. It all begins one day on Zagan's property when a sorcerer named Face Stealer tries to pop a girl's cherry for a ritual, but before he can, Zagan shows up and pops his head instead. When the girl passes out from the site, Zagan realizes he's gone too far and casts an undo spell to make his crime scene vanish like your incognito search history. Just then, his malnourished sorcerer friend named Barbados appears and asks if Zagan was planning on sacrificing the girl for her mana. However, Zagan explains that sacrificial magic isn't his style and finally teleports the girl off his property. After they walk off, Barbados announces that Marchosius, one of the 13 archdemons, is dead and there will be an auction of his things. Upon hearing this, they head toward the auction. Suddenly, a knight runs past them and Zagan points out that the guards seem weirdly on edge. Barbados then explains that some young women were abducted by some idiots for experimental sorcery. A few moments later, they arrive at the auction where Barbados introduces Zagan to candidates just like him who want to take Marchosius's place now that he's gone. Just then, the auction begins with the sale of an elf girl named Neffy who immediately takes Zagan's smelly breath away. After the auctioneer advertises her and commences the bidding, Zagan bids his entire net worth to buy her. Barbados warns him not to think with the bulge in his pants, but Zagan ignores him since Cupid must have hit him with a bazooka. Curious, Barbados asks him what kind of sorcery he needs an elf for, but Zagan responds with a devilish smile and levitates to check out his purchase. He then spots a collar on Neffy's neck and asks the auctioneer about it. In response, the auctioneer explains that it's a leash that keeps her mana contained, but no one knows how to unlock it. After this, Zagan announces that he can't wait to hear her scream for joy later. But this makes entire auction house uncomfortable, while Zagan wonders if he said something wrong. Later, at Zagan's mansion, he wonders how to start a conversation with Neffy, but after thinking of a few lame ideas, Neffy speaks up and asks how she'll be offed. Shocked, Zagan reveals he has no plans to do that and adds that he needs her alive to calm his raging hormones. Hearing this, Neffy asks if she should be expecting something worse than death, but Zagan freaks out and figures he should have gotten rid of the torture equipment in the room, which belonged to the previous owner of the mansion. After this, he introduces himself and adds that he's not interested in whips and all that. Just then, the socialist in Zagan runs out of fuel, so he berates himself for his poor social skills. Fortunately for him, Neffy introduces herself and reveals that she's a cursed child. While Zagan worries about this, Neffy tells him to look on the bright side since her cherry is unpopped.
Yeah, boy.
Mind blown by the view, Zagan freaks out, while Neffy explains that she thought he was concerned about her value as a subject for his experiments. However, when Zagan says he has no intentions to experiment on her, she asks why he bought her. Upon hearing this, Zagan realizes that slaves don't look forward to getting much from life, since that was the way he felt when he grew up surviving without his parents. So he then tells Neffy that he bought her because he needs her and decides to give her a room in the castle. Shortly after they arrive at the room, but on opening the door, they find a guillotine and a heap of skulls. Immediately, Zagan shuts the door, but when Neffy comments that he could take her head if he wants, Zagan explains that it's a trap he made for airborne intruders. Suddenly, he casts a spell that clears out the room, and they head in to check it out. The next morning, Zagan sits on his throne, watching over his most prized investment, since he's cooked if she runs. The room he had prepped for her wasn't conducive to sleep, so he asked Neffy to sleep beside his throne. While he thinks of all he could have done if he had a bed, he realizes he lacks the game to actually pull that off. After this, Zagan heads off to get breakfast and returns to find Neffy awake. So she greets him, but since he's an amateur at human interactions, Zagan wonders what to say and announces that he's brought breakfast. Later, while they eat, Neffy asks Zagan why he's having the same food as her since the dish is only good enough for slaves. On hearing this, Zagan realizes he hasn't changed his menu since his hustling days and wonders what normal people eat. So, Neffy asks if she could prepare something better, making Zagan freak out. Surprised she could cook, he announces that they're going shopping. However, when they head out and stop an Uber, Zagan realizes he's now broke after making it rain at the auction. So, while they trek, Zagan thinks about how to survive as a penniless bloke and contemplates robbing the coach driver. However, one glance at Neffy's innocent face made him reconsider. While he racks his brains for answers, his attention suddenly moves to the coach, which is being attacked by some hoodlums. Seeing this, Neffy fidgets while Zagan figures she must have been in a similar situation when she got picked. So he tells her to watch and strikes the bandits with lightning. Suddenly, the bandits face him and charge towards him. Zagan then crushes the first attacker's axe and breaks his nose with a flick, which throws him off balance. Alarmed, the other bandits call for help, and out of nowhere appears a sorcerer who then threatens Zagan and casts an explosive spell that roasts his comrades. Unimpressed, Zagan casts a spell that wipes out the flames in a second, so the sorcerer tries to cast another spell, but realizes he's lost control of his casting circle. So Zagan casts a spell that strikes the sorcerer with lightning and scares the bandits to bits. After they flee, Zagan glances at Neffy, but on seeing her terrified look, he wonders if he just blew his chances with the girl of his dreams. After this, the coach passengers thank Zagan for saving them, while the driver asks if Zagan can ride with them as a guard in exchange for a bag of coins. Surprised, Zagan checks the bag and realizes he could make a living by running off bad guys. Shortly after, they arrive in a town and head to a clothing store where they meet Manuela, the attendant, who freaks out on sighting Zagan. After she regains her composure, Zagan asks her to put together an outfit for Neffy. Suddenly, Manuela fawns all over Neffy but stops when she spots the collar. However, she ignores this and takes Neffy into the dressing room while Zagan wonders what to do with the collar. Not long after this, Neffy steps out in an outfit hot enough to make the devil hard for days. So when Manuela asks what he thinks, Zagan angrily asks why Neffy is dressed in underwear instead of a dress. In response, Manuela says she's just trying to get his freak on, making Zagan wonder what she thinks of him. Meanwhile, Neffy feels uncomfortable in the outfit, so Zagan insists that Manuela change the outfit into something normal. Some moments later, Neffy emerges from the dressing room in a maid's outfit, while Manuela explains the perks of wearing the outfit. Facing Neffy, Zagan asks what she thinks. In response, Neffy says she's cool with whatever he offers. Some moments later, they head into a blacksmith shop where Zagan asks if the collar on Neffy can be removed. Unfortunately, the blacksmith says it's enchanted and can take Neffy's head off if it's not taken off with its key. Just then, Zagan realizes he got too excited to ask for the key at the auction and figures it must be somewhere in Marchosia's mansion. When Zagan tries to pay the blacksmith, he refuses the payment and narrates how Zagan once saved him and his daughter from attackers. Afterward, they bought a few food items and sat to eat at a restaurant. While Zagan wonders if there's a magical shortcut to becoming a pro at talking to girls, he spots Neffy staring at the meal like it's a love letter written in Morse code. So he asks if she knows how to use a knife and fork, but she says she can't since she has never had a properly served meal. Just then, Zagan figures that Neffy is just like he was and realizes it's why he likes her. After this, Zagan tells her to eat with whatever she can work with, so Neffy picks up a fork and soon realizes it's not a walk in the park, so she spots a spoon and opts for it instead. After Zagan tries to eat with a fork and fails, Neffy feeds him with her spoon. After playing Romeo and Juliet for a bit, they realize they're the center of attention, so they leave the restaurant. Meanwhile, Chastel, the night girl Zagan saved, thinks about Zagan and how he saved her from the crazy sorcerer. When she figures something about him seemed lonely despite his cruel looks, Lord Clavwell interrupts her thoughts and reveals that it's been discovered that Zagan was behind the kidnapping. Shocked, Chastel says it must be a mistake, but when Clavwell insists that Zagan must face judgment, Chastel volunteers to take over the duty. The next day, Zagan wakes and gets invited for breakfast. Surprised, Zagan brings himself to say good morning and celebrates crossing that milestone low-key. Shortly after, they arrive at a well-prepared dining room, and Zagan marvels at the amazing transformation of what used to look like a graveyard. He then spots Neffy's ears twitching and wonders if that means she's happy. Afterwards, Zagan takes a seat and asks Neffy to join him, but she says she only cooked and set the table for one. Hearing this, Zagan asks her to sit on his lap and is shocked by his own audacity. However, when she sits, Zagan feeds her, and she reciprocates the gesture. Some days later, Neffy walks in on Zagan reading and asks what he's always studying about. In response, Zagan says it's sorcery and asks if elven magic is different from the one in his books. Neffy then reveals that she can't use sorcery, so Zagan decides to explain the basics to her while Neffy pays rapt attention. After he geeks out on how to override someone else's sorcery, Neffy asks if that's really possible. So, Zagan explains that in theory, doing that would make a sorcerer the most powerful of all time. In addition to this, Zagan adds that since it's not easy to do, only people with all screws loose poke around the idea. After this, Neffy asks Zagan what he intends to do with such incredible power, and he needs it to survive. To explain his point better, Zagan narrates a childhood story of how he stole to survive, until one day, when a sorcerer captured him and tried to sacrifice him. Somehow, Zagan managed to turn the spell around and exterminate the sorcerer, and since then, he learned that he needed to be strong to stay alive. While they talk, Zagan feels a perimeter breach signal and tells Neffy to make dinner while he goes to check out the intruders. Meanwhile, outside the castle, Chattel and her knights realize they've been going in circles, so she figures it must be a magical barrier effect. She then draws her sword and destroys the barrier. Suddenly, Zagan appears with an insane aura and asks if the church failed to teach its minions proper manners when visiting strangers. After checking out her sword and realizing it's one of the famous 12 sacred swords, he checks out the young girl wielding it and figures she's the girl whose cherry almost got popped. Despite this, Zagan says he's got better things to do, so he casts a spell that gets blocked by an anointed armor. Seeing this, Zagan figures the armor must be quite impressive, but asks the knights if they'll go home after he spanks their metallic rumps. Suddenly, a knight charges at him but gets repelled with a devastating punch. After making him an example, Zagan tells the others to get lost unless they'll make their skinny boss carry bodies on her way back. Annoyed by his taunts, another knight goes for his neck, but gets the shock of his life when Zagan slices through his sword with his bare hands and knocks him down with a flick. Zagan then steps on his head and says he can pulp it faster than anyone else can attack. Seeing this, Chastel sticks her sword in the ground and asks why Zagan is bent on making a bum out of them after they lose. In response, Zagan says he has to teach them fear and let them survive to spread the word of what happened. Meanwhile, Zagan knows that piling up bodies around the house would freak Neffy out. Sensing Zagan's reluctance, Chastile draws her sword and announces her intention to slay him. Immediately, she charges at Zagan, and he tries to cast a defensive spell, but Chastel slashes through his magic circle, so Zagan figures the sword is strong, but it's nothing to be worried about. After Chastile's failed efforts to dice him up, she asks why he isn't fighting back, and Zagan explains that he's never been good at taking on women outdoors. Frustrated, Chastel asks why someone like him soiled his hands in sorcery, and Zagan asks if using sorcery is some kind of crime. In response, Chastel says that sorcery is evil because its existence ensures that people are oppressed. However, when Zagan points out that the power she wields is not any different, Chastel attacks him again, but Zagan catches her sword with his palms. Suddenly, Chastile lifts him with the sword and tosses him at a tree. Shocked to realize she's been holding back all along, Zagan stares at his burning hands. Suddenly, Chastile attacks him again, but takes down half a tree instead of Zagan's head. Just when he decides to break his rule and end a woman, Chastity whispers and suggests he fakes his death since the church won't stop coming after him. Hearing this, Zagan figures Chastil could suffer dire consequences by aiding and abetting a sorcerer. But while he thinks of what to do with Neffy, she runs out screaming his name. Suddenly, one of the knights moves to attack her, but Zagan is fast enough to take the hit for her. Suddenly, the forest vibrates while Neffy controls some shrubs to tie up the knight. Sensing the impending disaster, Zagan hurriedly grabs Neffy and calms her down, leaving everyone gobsmacked. Later that night, Zagan asks Neffy why she told him she couldn't use sorcery, and after hesitating for a while, Neffy explains that it's not sorcery, but mysticism. Surprised to realize it's not just an idea in the books, Zagan asks if all elves can use the power, but Neffy explains that she could only use it because she's cursed. After this, she narrates how her village people treated her badly because of the curse, and she ends up crying into Zagan's arms. Afterwards, when Neffy apologizes for her not very demure display of emotion, Zagan tells her it's fine since she never says much anyway. She then asks if his hands still hurt from the fight, but when Zagan unwraps the bandage, he realizes his wound is gone. So he figures it must have happened when he touched Neffy and wonders how amazing mysticism is compared to sorcery. He then thanks her, making Neffy blush, and comments that it's her first time hearing him say that. Shocked, Zagan realizes he's been ungrateful and apologizes. Not long after this, while Zagan naps on his throne, Neffy shows up to ask if he'd like to sleep with her. Thinking she wants some action, he asks if she understands what she's asking for. Just then, Neffy explains that since the castle has only one bed, he'd rest better in one than on his favorite chair. When Zagan figures she isn't trying to pull off some stunts on his magnum, he gets disappointed and explains that he can't leave the throne room since his presence there is important to keeping his barriers up. However, Neffy goes on her knees and offers her lap to be used as his pillow. Not long after, Zagan rests his head on her lap while she asks if he's comfortable. But since the impressive view of her mountain peaks kept him fighting for his life, Zagan wonders how he ended up in that situation. So Neffy explains that it's her way of thanking him for letting her stay despite learning about her mysticism. But Zagan says it's unnecessary and asks if she's interested in learning sorcery since she doesn't seem to have much control over her mysticism. When Zagan adds that she might have a knack for it, Neffy says she'd like to learn sorcery to help him, so Zagan decides to make her his apprentice. The next day, Barbados shows up at the mansion and says he's heard about the Angelic Knights' attack. When he asks Zagan if he's fine, Zagan says that the knights were just brats who needed a spanking. However, when Barbados adds that he heard one of them had a sacred sword and asks if she wasn't a threat, Zagan says she managed to destroy a few barriers around the mansion. Just then, Barbados gets served a cup of tea and freaks out when he spots Neffy. Shocked to see that Zagan hasn't used her for a sacrifice yet, Barbados asks if he's trying to keep her alive and warm for other reasons, but Zagan introduces her as his apprentice. On hearing this, Barbados freaks out again, while Zagan adds that since some sorceries are hard to handle alone, he could use Neffy's help. Afterward, Barbados asks if Neffy's powers helped him chase off the Angelic Knights, and when Zagan confirms this, Barbados figures she must be responsible for the tangled shrubs. After this, Barbados asks Zagan if he's after one of the Archdemon's seats, and since getting the seat would earn him Neffy's collar key, Zagan says he is. But deep down, Zagan thinks he's unlikely to be chosen since it's been only a decade since he started studying sorcery, and he can't compare to others who have been at the game for a while. Suddenly, Barbados gets up and takes his leave, making Zagan wonder what he came for in the first place. After this, Neffy points out that Zagan seemed to be having a good time with his friend, but Zagan says she sounds ridiculous while wondering if she's right. So he gets up and announces that they're going to fix the barriers damaged by the Angelic Knights. Afterwards, Neffy works hard on her sorcery lessons and maintains the castle while Zagan enjoys her companionship. Although her use of mysticism still sucks, Zagan points out that she's starting to get a hang of it. So, Neffy thanks him and decides to go make food, while Zagan thinks of how to get the collar off her. Some weeks later, Zagan's barrier gets broken, and when he checks it out, a two-headed bird shows up with a letter, so he checks it out and finds out it's an invitation from the 12 archdemons. Afterwards, Zagan heads to an underground ruin used by the late archdemon and heads in, curious about what they want. On spotting them, Zagan gets terrified by their mana, while one of the archdemons points out that he's the youngest to be chosen. Regardless of this, Zagana asks if he's been called to be gawked at, amusing an archdemon who then points out that he's got quite the nerve to take that tone. Just then, one of the 12 announces that Zagan has been chosen as their 13th comrade and summons the archdemon brand Marchosha's left behind. While they explain that he'll need to acquire the emblem to take Marchosha's seat, Zagan wonders what the emblem is and why it has dense mana. After Zagan senses that the 12 archdemons are way more powerful than anything he's ever seen, he points out that there are other sorcerers better than him, but the archdemons respond by saying he's got significant power and no other sorcerer can snuff him out. After this, another archdemon states that the first sorcerer he annihilated wasn't weak. But despite this, Zagan managed to turn the tables on him and created a unique form of sorcery. Hearing this, Zagan figures his secret weapon is not so secret, while the archdemon talks about his ability to destroy even sorcerers if he craves it. Just then, the archdemon states that it's the reason why he's chosen despite his young age. So Zagan asks the archdemons if he could take them all on if what he says is true. But the archdemons laugh and state that they could take much more from him. Suddenly, Zagan thinks about Neffy and figures it's best he keeps her out of his deal with the devils. So the archdemons request his response, but Zagan says he has a request. After making his request, it was granted, so Zagan accepts the position and gets sealed with its powers. Later, when he returns home, Neffy welcomes him and asks him if something happened. In response, Zagan says he's become an archdemon and reveals that he has obtained all of Marchosha's. Suddenly, he takes out a key and unlocks Neffy's collar, surprising Neffy. He then adds that he has no more use for her and tells her to leave. Shortly after, Neffy awakens in a strange place after her post-breakup nap and recalls she was making dinner, but just when she decides to head back home, she spots her broken collar and realizes Zagan had set her free. While she sits down brooding, Chastel approaches her and is shocked when she realizes who it is. However, when Neffy spots Chastel, she gladly offers her head to be chopped since she just got dumped. Shocked, Chastel freaks out, drawing the attention of some people who then wonder if Neffy is being harassed by the Angelic Knight. Just then, Chastel tells Neffy to stop making her sound like a psychopath, and out of the blue appears Manuela, who then berates Chastel for being a bully. At that moment, Chastel fidgets and tries to declare her innocence, but the crowd supports Neffy, so they call out Chastel and tell her to be gone. While Neffy tries to calm the crowd, Chastel breaks down into tears and says she can't bear to see a girl hurt. Afterwards, at a bar, Chastel apologizes for losing her composure and insists she wasn't bullying Neffy. When Manuela points out that Chastel seems to know Neffy, she says they met on a previous mission. Hearing this, Neffy chimes in that Chastel didn't do anything to her when they first met. In addition to this, she points out that the idiot who tried to hurt her master surely regretted his actions. A few moments later, Neffy is served a dish. But when she points out that she has no money, Manuela says she'll handle the bills. However, she insists that Chastel must pay for her drinks, surprising Chastel, who then asks why she's getting treated like an ex-convict. On tasting the dish, Neffy recalls she was cooking the same dish for Zagan when he broke up with her, so she tears up, leaving the other girls surprised. So they rush over to her, and Manuela grabs them both and tells them to cry on her shoulders. After Neffy had told her sob story to the girls, Chastel chips in that Zagan is a user, but Neffy says that her master is not that kind of guy. Curious, Manuela asks if anything weird happened before he kicked her out, so Neffy flashes back and asks the ladies what an archdemon means. Manuela then explains that the town used to be run by Marchocias, and things were safe until he died. Ever since then, there has been a series of kidnappings of young girls by sorcerers. When Manuela adds that the church captured the sorcerer behind it, Chastel flashes back to the moment the crime was pinned on Zagan. Hearing this, Neffy asks why the town folk don't think favorably of the church, and Manuela explains that it's because they went around demanding ridiculous amounts of salvation offering. Hearing this, Chastel fidgets, expecting to be dragged, but Neffy says it's not her fault since she was only acting on orders. Hearing this, Chastel thanks Neffy for being so nice and explains that the angelic knights are sworn to wipe out the archdemons even if it costs their lives. She then adds that when a new archdemon is chosen, the church, as well as ambitious sorcerers, try to take them out before they can muster their strength, so this would likely result in a fight. While Neffy figures it must be why Zagan sent her away, Chastel asks her if she thinks Zagan is capable of organizing sorcerers for the sake of kidnapping people for sacrifice. But Neffy says she doesn't think so, while explaining that Zagan once rescued a carriage attacked by bandits because he finds weakness annoying. Chastel then adds that Zagan held back while fighting her because she was a woman, and blushes while thinking of how annoying it felt. Seeing this, Manuela asks if she's head over heels for him, but Chastel debunks this, stating that when she met Zagan, he looked like he needed help but wouldn't admit it. Just then, Neffy confirms this by saying it's more noticeable when he talks about his past and suddenly announces that she's going back to him. So the other ladies ask if she'll be okay, but Neffy says that although Zagan is unbeatable, he can still get hurt. When she adds that she wants to be there to support him, Chastel says she had better get to work investigating the sorcerer impersonating Zagan so she can clear his name. Seeing this, Manuela points out that they both seem to be feeling better, but insists that Chastel foots her bills. She then faces Neffy and tells her to visit her if she ever falls in trouble again. Surprised, Neffy asks Manuela why she's being nice to her, and Manuela says it's because they're friends. When Neffy says no one has ever said that to her, Manuela hugs her and says she'd be glad to be her first friend. Just then, Chastel asks if she can also be their friend, but Manuela asks if it's allowed for an angelic knight to befriend a sorcerer's associate. However, she insinuates they wouldn't be talking if they weren't friends already. Suddenly, some knights show up looking for Chastel, but on spotting Neffy, the soldier she attacked suffers from PTSD symptoms. While the other knights try to convince him there are no plants nearby, the ladies suddenly get engulfed by a presence. Chastel then quickly pushes Manuela out, so she escapes being taken. Meanwhile, a voice introduces himself as Zagan and tells the knights to come for the girls at his castle before making the ladies vanish. Afterwards, the knights land in one of Zagan's traps, so he blames them for ambushing him and realizes he set the trap with Neffy. However, he convinces himself it's for the best since she'll be safer away from him. Just when Zagan turns to leave, one of the knights grabs his foot and begs him to spare Chastel since she was willing to defy her superiors to prove his innocence. While Zagan wonders what he's talking about, Manuel arrives and informs Zagan that Chastel and Neffy have been kidnapped. Shocked, Zagan figures rescuing them will make their connections to him clear, and the church won't spare Chastel. While Zagan thinks of a plan, Manuela asks why he's standing around and reveals that Neffy was trying to get back to him when she got kidnapped. Upon hearing this, Zagan figures Neffy must care about him too, since he had said some terrible things to her. So he announces that Neffy belongs to him and vows to make the culprit pay. Suddenly, Zagan activates his magic circle and asks if Manuel cares to join him. When she joins him in the circle, Manuel reveals that the girls were snatched by some weird shadows, but Zagan says he already knows who's responsible. Meanwhile, in a cave somewhere, Neffy realizes the collar and manacles put on her are draining her mana, so she thinks of breaking them using her mysticism, but realizes there's no nature anywhere. Just then, Barbados steps out of the dark, and Neffy says she thought he was her master's friend. Amused, Barbados says he never thought he'd meet someone dumb enough to call sorcerers friends. After this, Barbados reveals that he is the disciple of the first sorcerer Zagan ever slayed and is entitled to everything Zagan now owns. In addition, Barbados reveals that he initially tried to set Zagan up against the church, but that failed when his goons left too many loose ends. Shocked, Chastel points out that he's the one behind the kidnappings and accuses him of committing vile acts. However, Barbados gets in her face and blames one of his goons for the sacrifices. On his way out, Barbados points out that he needed the sacrifices to prove to the archdemons that he's fit to join their ranks, but since the previous sacrifices didn't go as planned, he can use them instead. However, Nephi states that he'll be wasting his time since Zagan has already ascended to the position of Archdemon. Shocked by this, Barbados laments about Zagan stealing everything he ever wanted from him. So he grabs Nephi's chains and drags her along, while vowing to forcibly take the title from Zagan. Suddenly, Barbados activates his magic circle and tries to sacrifice Nephi, but she resists and states that she belongs to Zagan. Just when Barbados tries to cast a spell to teach her a lesson, the cave gets rocked by an explosion that wipes out Barbados' spell. When the rubble clears, Zagan shows up and commends Nephi for standing her ground. Surprised to see him, Barbados asks Zagan how long he has known, and Zagan reveals that he got suspicious when he found Face Stealer on his property and wonders how such a sucker penetrated his barrier. When Zagan points out that Barbados is the only person who makes a habit of getting through his security and explains how his sorcery works, Barbados asks why he still served him tea when he knew all along, and Zagan says he was curious about his plans. On glancing at Nephi, Zagan attacks Barbados and brings him to his knees. After this, he gets rid of Nephi's shackles and asks if she's hurt, but Nephi says he looks more hurt than she is. While she weeps and Zagan comforts her, Barbados announces that he's not dead yet and casts a spell to attack Zagan. Seeing this, Nephi panics, but Zagan tells her to chill out since nothing is going to happen. Immediately, Barbados' magic circle vanishes, so he tries other spells, but the same thing happens. Surprised, Nephi asks what's going on, and Zagan reminds her of his lecture on overriding sorcery, and reveals that it's possible since it was how he defeated Andras the sorcerer. Hearing this, Barbados gets furious and activates numerous magic circles, but to his dismay, they all vanish before they can work. While Barbados freaks out because of this, Zagan points out that he still has a lot to learn. After bragging about how he learned to improve sorceries that resonated with him, Zagan explains how his solitude days in the mansion paid off. He then recalls how Barbados kept showing up despite how badly he had treated him. In response, Barbados says he could have ended Zagan, but he was just curious to see what a brat like him was doing there. Just then, Zagan activates his magic circles and explains to Barbados that he took over his casting circle and converted it. On hearing this, Barbados freaks out and asks if Zagan just devoured his sorcery. In response, Zagan reveals that as an archdemon, he was given the title Sorcerer Slayer. He then strikes Barbados with a bolt of lightning and leaves him wondering if he'll stand a chance against Zagan as an archdemon. Afterwards, Barbados admits defeat and vows never to show his face again, while Zagan walks up to him. With his bloody face, Barbados reminds him they're friends, but Zagan activates his casting circle and lands a devastating punch near him. He then laughs and says that ending Barbados will ruin his chances of ever being treated to a good liquor. So Barbados asks if he's showing mercy, but Zagan says he's showing confidence, so Barbados vows never to give up until he ends Zagan. Unbothered, Zagan says it's fine as long as the drinks are on him anytime he loses. Surprised, Barbados asks Zagan what any sorcerer could gain from showing mercy to an enemy, but Zagan says he's not bound by convention and adds that he'll do whatever he wants. After this, Zagan tells Barbados to get strong enough to make him change his mind if he doesn't like his decision to spare him. Just then, the casting circle glows, and the cave begins to vibrate. So Zagan asks Barbados to chill out, but he says he's not doing anything. Just then, Zagan spots a surge of energy from a crack in the ground and figures his punch on the floor must have started something. So he tells the ladies to get out while a sudden swell of mana barges out of the ground. When Zagan asks Barbados what he was trying to do in the cave, he reveals that he was planning on summoning a true demon. Suddenly, the demon takes form while Zagan sizes it up and realizes none of them could withstand it. However, just when Zagan thinks he's about to die, the demon bows and pledges allegiance to him. On checking his hand, Zagan realizes the archdemon's emblem was growing, so he commands the demon to be gone. Immediately, the demon vanishes, and the cave begins to crumble, so Zagan tells everyone to hold on to him as he drags them out. On getting out, the knights show up at the cave entrance and are excited to see Chattel. However, they tell Zagan that they only came to rescue Chastel and not to aid and abet some wicked sorcerer. In response, Zagan tells them to get lost while Moella whispers in his ears, telling him to settle things with Nephi. After this, Zagana asks Barbados if he wants to keep fighting, but he says he's lost his ball after what he just saw. Barbados then asks Zagan if he'd really let him off the hook if he brings some good booze. When Zagan confirms this, Zagan vanishes, leaving Zagan clueless on what to say. Just then, Nefi tells Zagan that she'd like to remain at his side, so Zagan figures there's no need to wait any longer. So he gets on one knee and processes the right things to say internally, but eventually tells Nefi to call him by his name since he wants her to be more than just his apprentice. Hearing this, Nefi blushes while Zagan stutters, so he suddenly grabs her and says she belongs to him forever. After this, he beats himself up since he knows his ancestors won't survive the bants from their afterlife buddies. Nefi then smiles and accepts his weird proposal. After this, she brings out her slave collar and asks him to put it back on her. But when Zagan protests, Nefi says she wants it. So Zagan takes the collar and puts it back on her instead of an engagement ring. Some moments later, Nefi asks Zagan what they are if not slave and master, making Zagan rack his brains for an answer. Later at a bar, the townsfolk talk about Zagan's ascension to being the new archdemon, and coincidentally, Gremory and Chimeris overhear the discussion. When Chimeris asks if Gremory isn't bothered about it, she tells him to watch since things will change soon enough. While some other guys talk about Zagan ruling the town, a scary monster shows up, scaring the men enough to make them run. Meanwhile, at the church, Chastel refuses to lead the hunt for Zagan, and claims he's innocent. After accusing her of defending a sorcerer, Clavwell relieves Chastel of her position as an angelic knight commander. However, the other knights protest about this, but Chastel commands them to stand down. Not long after this, Chastel hands over her sacred sword and relinquishes her authority as the commander of the angelic knights. While she considers her situation and figures it's for the best, Clavwell tells her not to feel bad since the punishment will be rescinded soon. However, he tells her to remain patient while he resolves the situation, and also warns her that he can only protect her politically. He then informs her of the arrival of Raphael, a ruthless sacred sword wielder. On hearing this, Chastel freaks out and figures he must be coming to town to purge her as an apostate. Meanwhile, Zagan flashes back to his encounter with a demon while researching demons. Just then, he senses Nefi sneak in behind him and wonders if she's trying to surprise him. When she tries to cover Zagan's face, he climbs the library ladder and asks what she's up to. In response, Nefi says she's trying to surprise him since he's been busy. Hearing this, Zagan thinks she's adorable and asks if she needs anything, so Nefi announces that lunch is ready. After a while, they check out the dish, and while Zagan stares mind-blown, Nefi explains what the dish is made of. Curious, Zagan asks how she learned more recipes, and Nefi explains that Manuela told her about them. Afterwards, they dig in, and after Zagan comments on how delicious the food tastes, Nefi says she made pudding for dessert, surprising Zagan, who then wonders what that is. After she explains that Manuela taught her how it's made, Zagan points out that they seem to be getting along. He then asks if Manuela isn't doing anything weird to her, and Nefi reveals that she only asks her to try some embarrassing outfits on. A few moments later, Zagan is served the pudding, and when he tastes it, he freaks out. Suddenly, his joyride gets interrupted by a crash in his barrier, so he informs Nefi that they've got a visitor. When she asks if she should go check, Zagan tells her to stay put. Just then, the intruder lands within the barrier and gets attacked from all directions, but is protected by a magical shield. Immediately, the intruder casts a spell that blasts through the entrance door, leaving Zagan impressed that she could withstand his traps. Just then, a tall monster figure barges in and asks if he's Zagan the Archdemon. In response, Zagan lectures his guest on etiquette and points out that he has seen her at the auction. When Zagan identifies her as Valefer, she announces her intention to slay Zagan and take his power. But Zagan tells her that she'll have to wait since he's in the middle of a meal. So Valefer refrains from attacking. But when Zagan and Nefi continue playing Couple of the Year, Valefer breaks out of her armor and attacks Zagan. However, Zagan blocks the attack and gets furious, so he hits Valefer back, and she crashlands. While Zagan realizes he needs to strengthen his barriers since there'll be more attacks, Valefer's helmet falls off, so Nefi hurries to check her out. Surprised, Nefi points out that it's just a girl while Zagan freaks out for knocking a little girl unconscious. Confused, Zagan points out that there must be some cold medicine somewhere in the house, but Nefi responds, saying cold medicine won't help. Afterwards, in a room in the castle, Valefer awakens, wondering where she is. However, when she spots Zagan, she throws a punch which he blocks and tells her she's lucky to have her head in place. After this, Valefer asks Zagan why he let her live, and he explains that she has Nefi to thank for that. In return, Zagan asks why she attacked him, and she reveals she wanted power because she's weak. After this, Zagan asks why she picked him of all targets, and she reveals that she thought she stood a chance since he's a sorcerer slayer. In response, Zagan says it's true he can't neutralize her racial abilities, since she's a dragon. While Valefor sulks about her failed mission, Zagan realizes she reminds him of his younger self, so he decides to punish her for attacking an archdemon by commanding her to assist Nephi for a week. He then thinks that, with his judgment, he can show Valefor how to behave, even as a villain. Just then, Valefor asks if he's not going to eat her, since some humans believe eating dragon flesh makes them stronger. Surprised, Nephi asks Zagan if that's true, so Zagan explains how dragon parts have been used since ancient times and states it's why Valefor concealed her identity. Afterward, Zagan, if they had any leftovers from lunch, and not long after this, Valefor was served some food. When she asks Zagan what he's planning, Zagan says he hates people who waste food, especially when it was cooked by Nephi. On tasting the food, Valefor says it's delicious, and within seconds, she empties the plate. Just then, Zagan says he's leaving for the library, but Valefor points out that she could attack Nephi and escape, but Zagan tells her to knock herself out while at it. He then reminds her of what would happen if her secret ever gets out. In addition to this, Zagan adds that Nephi is much stronger than her, surprising Valefor. Afterward, while Zagan spies on the ladies, hoping things don't go wrong, he spots the ladies bonding over laundry. A few moments later, Valefor commends Nephi's cooking, and in response, Nephi tells her to feel free to use anything in her room. When Nephi asks Valefor if she's afraid of Zagan, Valefor says that his power is scary, and she doesn't stand a chance. Just then, Nephi points out that Zagan doesn't use his powers without good reason, and Valefor agrees with her since Zagan didn't show a glimpse of his true power. After this, Nephi asks Valefor what she plans to do afterwards, but she says she has no idea since she can't take on any of the other archdemons. While Zagan wonders what a dragon child is doing in a human settlement, pretending to be a sorcerer, Valefor asks Nephi why she obeys Zagan. In response, Nephi reveals that she does, because when Zagan bought her, he treats her like a person and not a slave. After this, Nephi asks Valefor if she has anyone who treats her that way, but she says she doesn't. In the following days, Valefor worked without complaints while Zagan continued his research. He then figures he needs to head back to Marchosha's lair for answers. Just then, Valefor walks in to inform him that dinner is ready. However, when Zagan heads out, Valefor asks if he isn't worried she might attack him from behind. But Zagan flashes back to Barbato's threats and tells her to bring it on since he is always ready. However, he adds that if she loses, she'll work for him longer. Later, while they eat, Nephi asks Valefor if she likes the meal, and she responds by apologizing to Zagan for interrupting his meal when she arrived. So Zagan informs Nephi that he'd like to take Valefor to investigate Marchosha's castle. But Valefor suddenly protests, saying he's crazy for wanting to share the former archdemon's knowledge with her. After this, Valefor asks why he isn't forcing her to obey him, and Zagan says as far as he's concerned, she's just a kid. Hearing this, Valefor tears up, making Zagan freak out, so he rubs her head. Later, while Zagan and Nephi watch Valefor fall asleep, he takes a spoon from her hands, so she grabs Zagan's fingers instead and calls him father. Shocked, Zagan wonders if she's dreaming about her parents. Meanwhile, Nephi says it's like they have a child now, making Zagan freak out. On realizing how that sounds, Nephi freaks out too. Sometime later, Valefor writes in a journal about her activities in Zagan's castle, and includes that she doesn't understand the relationship between Zagan and Nephi. Every morning, Nephi stares at Zagan's sleeping face in the throne room. After checking him out from different angles, she blushes and wiggles her pointy ears. After this, Valefor includes in her journal that Zagan spends all day reading sorcery books in his library and giving Nephi lessons on sorcery. While spying on them, Valefor spots Nephi sitting on Zagan's lap while reading together. Just then, Valefor bumped into some stacked books, and she got caught peeking. After worrying she might get punished, nothing happened. The next day, they head out to the clothing shop where Manuela throws a tantrum after making Valefor cosplay as Pokemon. Zagan then tells her to chill out since Valefor is not an object up for grabs. When they leave the store, Nephi points out that they made the right choice since Valefor likes her outfit. Just then, Valefor thanks Zagan for the clothes and grabs their hands. Suddenly, Zagan feels like a first-time baby daddy and freaks out when he realizes he's developing a kind of sentiment. While they head off, he dreads the bants from Barbatos in advance. Meanwhile, somewhere nearby, Chastel blames herself for ditching her armor and the sacred sword for a ride she might never get. She then figures it would be bad to get in between Zagan and Nephi while picturing them building a family together. Shortly after this, she bumps into Zagan and the other on their family's day out, and freaks out when she spots Valefor. She then asks if making babies happen that fast, but Zagan says he and Nephi haven't crossed that line. Just then, Valefor asks Zagan who she is, and since he has no idea, he diverts the question to her. On realizing Zagan has no idea who she is, Chastel weeps while Neffy reminds him of who she is. So, Zagan says he didn't realize it since she's outside her armor. So Zagan introduces her to Valefor as Neffy's friend. Just when Zagan asks why she's dressed like a civilian, the knights arrive and are surprised to see Zagan. Suddenly, Zagan senses magic nearby, so he checks out Valefor and spots her preparing to attack the knights. He then tells her that a fight at that spot won't end well. After he takes the fight out of her, the knights grab Chastel and inform her that Clavwell needs her attention. When they leave, Zagan asks Valefor if the knights once offended her, but she insinuates that a sorcerer doesn't need a reason to hate the angelic knights. Shortly after, they arrive at Marchosia's underground mansion, and while they admire the structure, Valefor feels a familiar aura and states that dragons once lived in the mansion. Surprised, Zagan asks if she's certain, and Valefor confirms that the structure reminds her of where she used to live. So, Zagan suggests they check for anything dragon-related and opens the door. On entering this mansion, Valefor spots a golem and asks Zagan what it is. In response, Zagan explains that it's a creature created with sorcery to guard the building and suggests they stay clear of it, to avoid activating it. Not long after this, Valefor finds a casting circle with dragonic patterns. As a reward, Zagan rubs her hair, racks his brain trying to figure it out. Eventually, he asks Valefor what she thinks it is, and she reveals that it's a hidden door. Zagan then suggests she tries to open it, so while Valefor activates the casting circle, Zagan spots Neffy acting weird and asks her if something is wrong. While Neffy blushes and twitches her ears, Zagan figures she wants to be rubbed too, but since they've got company, he tells her not to move and rubs her head instead. Suddenly, they realize Valefor is staring, so they break apart and head down the stairs. Shortly after, they arrive in a really large library. Just then, Zagan announces that their goal is to gather books about demons. While he checks out some books, Valefor asks Zagan if he reads minds, but when Zagan says he wonders, Valefor points out that he could tell what Neffy wanted without her asking. In response, Zagan explains that Neffy always gives him clues. After this, Zagan points out that since dragons live really long, she'll also learn to tell what people want without asking over time. Valefor then asks if she can stay with him, and Zagan responds by saying he won't stop her if she tries to leave. Suddenly, Valefor hugs Zagan to say she'll stay, but she soon spots a book about the 12 sacred swords. Zagan then grabs it from her and figures he has seen the archdemon crest engraved on a sacred sword. Meanwhile, at the church, Raphael approaches Chastel and the other knights. After they exchanged pleasantries, Raphael commended Chastel for her work despite being relieved of her command. However, when he asks how many sorcerers she has slain, she figures Raphael won't hesitate to take off her head for apostasy. But regardless, she states that the number is not something to boast about. While the other knights caution her to be mindful of her words, Raphael laughs and says it's been a while since he'd met anyone with balls big enough to talk to him like that. When he threatens to send her to the afterlife with her balls, the other knights get between them. At the moment, Clavwell arrives and asks Raphael what he's doing with his knights, but Raphael says he has no business with a bureaucrat like him. When Clavwell says that he has a duty to protect his knights, Raphael asks about the whereabouts of Chastel's sacred sword. Clavwell then asks what he needs it for, so Raphael explains that the sword won't choose someone else as long as its previous owner is alive. He then asks if he can take off Chastel's head. Just then, Chastel tells Raphael that he's speaking out of turn, annoying him enough to draw his sword on her. When Raphael points out that Chastel is about to face him unarmed, Clavwell decides to return the sword to her. Shortly after this, Raphael takes his leave, making Chastel wonder what he's up to. Not long after this, she finds a letter on her room table. In some bar somewhere, Barbados laughs at Zagan's baby daddy situation and states that there are rumors about him kidnapping some brat. Annoyed, Zagan makes to leave, but Barbados pulls him back and offers him some booze. Afterwards, he asks Zagan if he took on another apprentice, but Zagan only reveals that it's someone he knows. Just when Zagan thinks Barbados can't figure it out, he points out that Valefor raided his place not long ago and asks what happened to the guy. Zagan then says that he got lucky and survived, but Barbados points out that Valefor is rumored to be a dragon and adds that he could make some potent catalysts out of his corpse. Afterwards, Zagan asks if they can get to the main talk, so Barbados reveals that the church has sent for the most dreadful of sacred sword users who has a sorcerer body count of 499. When Barbados reveals that he's rumored to have eaten a dragon, Zagan worries about Valefor. While they play best friends, Raphael walks into the bar and shows up behind them. Shocked to see Raphael, Barbados wonders what he's doing at the bar, while Zagan calmly sips his drink. When Raphael smiles at the bartender, she passes out, scaring the other customers who suddenly flee the scene. Suddenly, Barbados activates his casting circle and approaches Raphael. But when his circle suddenly disintegrates, he rushes back to ask Zagan if he ate his sorcery again. Just then, Zagan tells him to chill out and also explains that Raphael wasn't there to fight since he can't sense any bloodlust from him. So he invites Raphael to join them, impressing the sacred sword wielder. Afterward, Zagan wonders about what to say to Raphael, while Barbados tries to revive the unconscious bartender. Meanwhile, Zagan stares at Barbados fooling around and decides he'd rather hang out with Raphael. Just then, he faces Raphael and asks if he has any business to discuss. In response, Raphael introduces himself and states that he heard that Zagan has been tangling with one of his fellow knights. Hearing this, Zagan figures it must be Chastel, and says he also heard that Raphael makes a hobby of sorcerers. When he asks if Raphael doesn't mind two of them standing before him, Raphael says that all he has ever done is snuff out embers that risk becoming an inferno. While Zagan contemplates what to believe, Raphael points out that Zagan has fought Chastel before, so he asks if she's strong enough to pose a threat to him. Zagan then says she was more formidable than anyone he's ever fought before. Hearing this, Raphael says that she's a threat to the church since she objected to the hunt for Zagan. While Zagan berates her in his mind for hanging herself for his sake, Raphael rises to take his leave. Just then, Zagan realizes that Raphael came to find a justification to end Chastel, so he calls Raphael and explains that Chastel has friends who would mourn her death. After declaring that the town is his territory, Zagan threatens to make Raphael history if he steps out of bounds. However, Raphael laughs and comments that Zagan is the kind of evil the church would dedicate its resources to snuffing out. After Raphael leaves, Barbados suggests that Zagan go after him and make him history. However, Zagan tells Barbados to check on Chastel, but when he asks why he should, Zagan points out that it should be easy with his teleportation skills. When Zagan promises to compensate him with some sorcery books, Barbados activates his magic and says Zagan will regret it. After he vanishes, Zagan realizes Barbados left without paying for the drinks. On returning home, Zagan finds Neffy up and waiting for him while Valefor sleeps on her lap. When he states that they should have gone to bed, Neffy says that Valefor insisted on waiting for him but fell asleep since she had a long day moving books around. Impressed, Zagan rubs her head and wonders if he should end Raphael before he encounters Valefor, since he suspects he might be involved in the loss of her parents. Just then, he gets interrupted by Neffy, who wishes she had Valefor's lifespan just to remain beside Zagan. Suddenly, their eyes lock, and Zagan starts to notice new things about Neffy's face. Just when things were about to get steamy, Barbados shows up to ruin the soap opera moment. However, when Barbados meets a furious Zagan, he asks why he's angry and appears with Chastel in his arms. Barbados then reveals that she was poisoned, so Zagan quickly calls Neffy to treat her. Suddenly, Valefor awakens and, on spotting the sacred sword on Chastel, she channels Bruce Banner and dashes towards her. However, Zagan was quick to stop her and told her that Chastel is his guest. When Valefor complains that someone with a sacred sword slew her parents, Zagan talks her out of her blood rage while offering to teach her the proper approach to getting her revenge. Later, when Chastel came to, she was shocked to be in a bedroom alone with Zagan. Just then, Zagan reveals she was poisoned and asks if she recalls what happened before then. Chastel then narrates how she got summoned by an anonymous letter to a location where she met some hooded dude who claimed to be part of a reconciliation faction. According to the guy, the group believes the church and sorcerers can coexist peacefully, so he states that his defiance of the church makes her vulnerable and offers her protection. However, he gives her time to think about it and tells her to call out the name Orobas whenever she gets in trouble. On returning to her office, Chastel drinks some tea from a kettle on her table and collapses. After this, Zagan asks if she has any idea who the culprit might be, so Chastel says Raphael is her prime suspect. However, Zagan would never give up the opportunity to make her head roll. After this, Zagan tells her to make herself at home since she's friends with Neffy, but when he turns to leave, she grabs his cape. So, Zagan asks what she's up to, and Chastel asks him to stay a bit longer. Just then, Zagan flips the chair around and sits while backing her. Just then, Chastel beats herself up for trying to be a homewrecker. The next day, Chastel freaks out when she gets dressed in a maid's outfit and is handed tools with which she'll earn her keep. When she points out that she's only good with swords, Zagan says he doesn't run a charity for freeloaders. She then turns to Valefor, whose stare is intense enough to burn through diamonds. When she tries to be friendly, Valefor basically tells her to bugger off. Surprised, Chastel wonders what she did wrong, and Zagan explains that Valefor lost her dad to a sacred sword wielder. Hearing this, Chastel suggests she leave for her safety, but Zagan says she'll be fine. Not long after this, the mansion gets rocked by Chastel's screams as she gets terrorized by frogs planted by Valefor. When Chastel complains about this, Zagan says that Valefor is young and could use a human toy. In the subsequent days, Valefor makes life a living hell for Chastel, and while she puts this down in her journal, Zagan walks. Valefor assumes Zagan is about to give a pep talk on good behavior, but he simply tells her to take it easy while having fun with Chastel. Later that night, Valefor has a dream where Raphael crouches near her father's corpse, so she heads to Chastel's room to put an end to her for good. However, she changes her mind and wishes Chastel would get angry and draw her sword. The next day, Nephi rushes to the throne room to alert Zagan of Valefor's absence. The previous night, while writing in her journal, Valefor had realized that the love she's getting at Zagan's castle is making her soft and unfit for her revenge, so she left her journal behind and flew away. Not long after this, she arrives at Marchosha's mansion, hoping to find enough power to exterminate a sacred sword wielder. However, when she tries to open the door, she realizes she'd be betraying Zagan by stealing from the underground castle. Coincidentally, Raphael shows up and is surprised to find an archdemon castle, while Valefor wonders if he followed her. The moment spots the sacred sword on Raphael, she flashes back to her dream and realizes Raphael must be the man who snuffed out her father. Meanwhile, Raphael wonders what a little girl is doing in such a place. Suddenly, Valefor charges towards him to exact her revenge, but as soon as Raphael draws his sword, Valefor realizes she's screwed. Luckily for her, Zagan shows up in time to save her and puts her on curfew. When Valefor asks why he showed up to save her, Zagan says he had a convenient mode of transport. Hearing this, Barbados appears and says he deserves a better name than that. Meanwhile, Valefor asks why he showed up when she betrayed him, but Zagan tells her to stop worrying about little things. Suddenly, she tears up and hugs Zagan, who then turns to Raphael and reminds him of his warning. Zagan then scoffs at the idea of a sorcerer defending someone else, but Zagan says that Valefor is his daughter, and not just anyone else. On hearing this, Raphael decides it's exactly why he needs to put them in the ground together. So Zagan activates his casting circle while Raphael charges up his blade, which creates a surge that cracks Zagan's casting circle. However, Zagan didn't budge despite Raphael's brags about the ability of his sword to turn a sorcerer into a priest. Meanwhile, this scares the crap out of Barbados and Valefor, who then asks Zagan why he's provoking his terrifying opponent. In response, Zagan reminds her of his promise to teach her how to get revenge by drawing out her opponent's potential and then crushing it. After this, Zagan activates a different magic circle and dashes towards Raphael. But when they clash, Raphael couldn't believe there was a sorcery strong enough to stop his sacred sword. During his clash with Chastel, Zagan had learned that sacred swords could cut through his casting circle, so he learned from Marchosha's legacy and augmented his circle to absorb mana from the environment. As a result of this, Zagan repels Raphael and tells him that his sacred sword won't be enough to defeat him. Suddenly, Raphael charges at Zagan again, but Zagan dodges the strike, so Raphael hits the rocks instead. When Zagan tells Raphael to avoid making a mess, Raphael attacks again, but Zagan summons his magic circle, which takes a few more hits before vanishing. Seeing this, Raphael attacks again, thinking he's about to end the fight, but Zagan activates a different magic circle and sends Raphael flying through the doors with a punch. While Zagan feels confident about his finishing punch, Raphael steps out of the rubble looking pretty like a makeup done with a hammer. Back at Zagan's mansion, Chastel finds Nephi sitting next to Barbados' open portal and asks about Zagan. In response, Nephi reveals that he's gone after Valefor and is defending her from someone attacking her. On hearing this, Chastel decides to go lend a hand, but hesitates when she realizes the church might hunt her for siding with sorcerers. While she's stuck wondering what to do, Nephi asks if she's okay, but in response, Chastel asks Nephi why she isn't there helping out. But Nephi says that Zagan ordered her to stay at the castle. Suddenly, she hugs Chastel and states that it's her duty to stay back at the castle to welcome Zagan when he returns. Hearing this, Chastel says she knows it's stupid to claim to be enemies, after being helped many times by Zagan and Nephi. Chastel then explains that she'd like to help Zagan, but she can't because she's still an angelic knight. After Nephi gives Chastel a heartfelt pep talk on doing what she wants, Chastel asks Nephi why she's going out of her way to make her feel better. So, Nephi says it's because they're friends, so Chastel thanks her and hops in the portal. Meanwhile, at Marchosha's castle, Zagan watches Raphael's wounds heal and figures the rumors about feeding on dragon flesh must be true. After this, Zagan tells Valefor to prepare for her revenge, making Raphael wonder why he's hated. Valefor then accuses him of slaying her father, who was the legendary sage dragon named Orobas. She then narrates how a group of angelic knights visited her father, but when he flew off with them, he went missing for 7 days. Worried, Valefor went in search of him, but found him murdered with a sacred sword, and to make matters worse, she spots Raphael feasting on his blood. On hearing this, Raphael charges towards her, but Zagan blocks his attack. However, Raphael refuses to back down and attacks Valefor again. But this time, Valefor casts a spell, which is accompanied by a massive explosion. When the dust settles, they realize it was a result of Chastel clashing swords with Raphael. Just when she tells Raphael that he's had enough fun, Valefor wonders how she got there. So Barbados realizes he forgot to close his open portal. At that moment, Valefor asks Chastel what she's doing, and she blames herself for the situation. Meanwhile, Raphael looks worse than a chopping stump, so Zagan states that it's pointless trying to end a man who's begging to die. When Chastel asks Zagan what he means, he explains that Raphael's bloodlust vanished after Valefor mentioned Orobas' name. Suddenly, Chastel realizes that Raphael must be the hooded guy who offered to protect her if she joins the Reconciliation faction. While Zagan tries to get Raphael to talk, he senses a dark presence from within the castle. Suddenly, the creature steps out, and Zagan figures it is the dormant golem in the castle, now up and draining mana from the surroundings, thanks to the surge from the clash of the sacred swords. So, Barbados asks Zagan what he plans to do about it before they all get drained. Suddenly, Zagan activates his command and orders the golem to return to where it came from. But the golem seems infuriated by the command, so it tries to obliterate Valefor, but Raphael takes the heat and loses his arm from the impact. Annoyed, Zagan takes down the golem in a single hit. After this, Zagan checks out the wound and realizes it's fatal. So he asks Raphael why he sacrificed himself, and he reveals that he only did his duty. However, Zagan insists there must be more to it and asks Raphael to spill. Just then, Raphael debunks Valefor's accusations that he snuffed out Orobas and explains that the great dragon could never be taken on by a single person. However, when Valefor claims that she saw him devouring her father's corpse, Raphael narrates how he visited Oroba to seek his help to defeat a powerful demon. Hearing this, Valefor accuses Raphael of spinning up stories, so Raphael reveals that he didn't believe in the existence of demons until he witnessed the appearance of one. So, Valefor glances at Zagan, who then also confirms the existence of demons. Hearing this, Valefor asks if her father fought and lost to a demon, but Raphael clarifies that he sacrificed his life to defeat the demon. On hearing this, Valefor asks where she should channel all her hate, but Raphael tells her not to feel hate but pride since her father gave his life to defend the world in which she lives. After this, Raphael reveals that the demons are a menace and humanity could be wiped out if they were to return to a world where the church and sorcerers fight among themselves. In addition to this, Raphael reveals that Orobas wanted him to live on, so he had to drink his blood on the battlefield to make himself Captain Man. After this, Raphael states that his duty has come to an end. He then adds that the years of endless vendetta between the church and sorcerers must end to give humanity hope. Hearing this, Barbados points out that Raphael can't be serious, since he single-handedly sent many sorcerers to the afterlife. In response, Raphael says he is right and explains that it's why Chastel is an important part of the puzzle. Just when Chastel says she isn't on board with their faction, yet, their attention gets drawn to the golem trying to assemble and reanimate itself. So, Zagan announces that he's got it handled and points out that the golem is made with sorcery. However, Raphael informs him that the creature is a chimera, made from the sorcerous combination of a demon and a golem. So, Zagan decides to put the creature down for good, but gets approached by Chastel, who offers to fight by his side. Suddenly, Chastel powers up her sword and charges towards the creature, preparing to attack. At the same moment, the creature releases another powerful beam, which Chastel blocks with her sword, creating an opening for Zagan to attack the creature's body. After he lands a hit, parts of the golem scatter, but soon turn against him in a controlled manner. Seeing this, Zagan figures the black haze must be the essence of the creature, so Chastel quickly slices through the pieces while Zagan finishes off the beast with his Heaven's Phosphor spell. Chastel then asks him how he pulled that off, so Zagan explains that he inverted his Heaven's Scale spell and cast it inside the beast. Impressed by this, Chastel commends his efforts while Zagan reciprocates the gesture. Not long after this, Valefor calls Zagan's attention to Raphael, so he tries to use his magic to heal him. But since his wounds were fatal, Raphael informs Chastel that she has become the symbol of their cause and will get help from others who share his belief. Curious, Zagan asks Raphael why he ended many sorcerers, and he reveals that he always wanted a friendly dialogue. But for some reason, they always attacked him first, forcing him to defend himself. Just then, they figured it was a huge misunderstanding, so Zagan points out that anyone could assume he's the bad guy with his fearsome looks. Just then, Raphael instructs Chastel to return to the church and promises to take care of those who poisoned her. When he manages to get up, Raphael tells Valefor she can take his head after he finishes his last task, but she asks him about her father instead. After Zagan tells her how grand her father was, he limps off while Zagan asks Valefor what she wants to do. In response, Valefor says it doesn't feel right to end Raphael anymore. However, at the church, the other knights informed the Clavwell that Chattel is nowhere to be found, so he orders them to find her immediately. Just when they leave, the cardinal laments about his failure to successfully end Chastel. After this, he berates the other cardinals for objecting to Chastel's execution and fantasizes about the sacred sword going to another person if Chastel had died from his poison. He then unboxes his vial of poison while vowing to end every sinner who hesitates to slay sorcerers. Just then, Raphael barges in, and Clavwell fakes concern for his missing arm. However, when Raphael insists he's fine, Clavwell tries to offer him the poison while claiming it's medicine, but Raphael knows better, so he slices off the cardinal's hand, making him suffer. After this, Raphael plugs Clavwell's mouth with his boots and says it's time they let the new generation have their time. While Clavwell silently prays for someone to save him, Raphael finishes him off. The next day, when Zagan informed Chastel that the Raphael had gotten rid of the cardinal who poisoned her, Chastel says she had her suspicions about him. Afterward, Zagan jokingly says that her tea is poisoned, shocking Chastel, who then freaks out. When Chastel says that she almost spilled the tea Nephi prepared, Zagan points out that it wasn't prepared by Nephi. Just then, Chastel approaches Valefor, who then avoids her touch, but when she turns to leave, Valefor tells her to visit them again. When Chattel turns to leave, Raphael taps her shoulder while she freaks out thinking she'd seen a ghost. Raphael then explains that apart from the healing gifts he got from Orobas, Nephi's magic hands saved him from chilling with the hooded guy with a long sickle. While Chastel freaks out about this, Raphael drops another shocker by saying he prepared the tea and referred to Zagan as his lord. Surprised to hear this, Chastel wonders what was going on, so Raphael reveals he's been hired as Zagan's butler. After Chastel freaks out again, Zagan flashes back to how they had found him outside the castle. He had stayed alive, hoping Valefor would finally put him to rest, but to his surprise, she forgave him and insisted that he work for Zagan. Afterwards, Valefor asks Raphael if he misses his arm, but Raphael says it's nothing to be worried about. Just then, Valefor offers him the arm from the armor she wore when she was disguised as a sorcerer. So Raphael thanks her and pledges his allegiance to her. After this, they all walk Chastel out and bid her farewell. Suddenly, Barbatos shows up and asks if he missed the send-off party, but Zagan decides to feed him in exchange for watching over Chastel. However, Barbatos refuses until he is offered payment, so he vanishes and gets to work. Just then, Zagan and Nephi decide to have a couple's moment, while Raphael shields Valefor's young eyes. Sometime later, Valefor resumes her journaling and wonders if she should tear off the last page she wrote. However, she decides to keep it as a reminder of how Zagan protected her. She then writes about Raphael and how she once thought he murdered father, but turns out to be an amazing cook who knows a wider variety of sweets, which he allows her to try out first. However, the only problem she has with him is that he prevents her from watching Zagan, and Nephi do censored stuff together. However, one day while Zagan and Nephi try to check out some sweets Raphael had just made, Nephi picks up one and tries to feed Zagan. Seeing things were about to get steamy, Raphael tries to cover Valefor's face, but she evades him and gets to watch the telenovela scene. Later, Valefor meets Nephi and Zagan to go shopping in town, since Chastel is coming over and a feast is in order. Shortly after, they arrive in town, and the people admire their little family. After they got all they needed, Nephi suggested they visit Manuela's store, making Zagan worry in advance. When they arrive, Nephi presents some sweets she made to Manuela to thank her for teaching her numerous recipes. Excited, Manuela decides to have Nephi try on some outfits, but when she refuses, Manuela drives her into the dressing room. Just then, Zagan spots a phonograph and tells Valefor to check it out. When she asks what it is, Zagan explains that it's a device created by a sorcerer to play music. While they check it out, Manuela announces that it's broken and was dumped at her doorstep since the street kids who found it couldn't sell it anywhere. Hearing this reminds Zagan of his childhood, so he decides to buy it for an outrageous amount. When Manuela points out that it's enough to get 100 outfits for the kids and also reiterates that it's broken, Zagan tells her to do whatever she wishes with the money and adds that he can easily fix it. Later, at Zagan's castle, Chastel points out that they arrived early, while Raphael informs them that Zagan and the others will soon return. Afterwards, Nephi and Valefor arrive, and while they exchange pleasantries, Zagan walks in and asks if Chastel has been doing well. After Chastel rants about all the paperwork she had to do, Zagan joins Barbatos on the couch and reminds him he wasn't invited. In response, Barbados says that it wouldn't hurt to feed him, but Valefor calls him a minion and asks if they have enough food for an extra mouth. Annoyed, Barbados tells the little wench to watch her mouth, but Zagan interrupts him and threatens to end him if he insults his daughter. After this, Neffy announces that she is heading off to make the food, so Chastel offers to help. A few moments later, when they arrive in the kitchen, Valefor asks Chastel if she can cook. In response, Chastel says she can help with the dishes, but suddenly knocks over one of the ingredient baskets. However, Valefor was quick to keep them still with a spell. Suddenly, Chastel screams loud enough to make Zagan realize it's going to be a long evening. While he fixes the phonograph, Barbados shows up and asks if he's building a bomb. In response, Zagan explains that it's an ancient form of sorcery that can be very informative. When he puts the phonograph together, Barbados suggests Zagan do something about Chastel. Surprised, Zagan asks if there are still church people after her life, but Barbados explains that her entire life is a comedy of errors. He then flashes back to how he had to stay up all night, saving the klutz from herself. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Chastel serves the soup she made, but when Neffy tastes it, she freaks out. Surprised, Valefor asks if it's that bad, and Neffy says it tastes worse than muddy water. Suddenly, Neffy shuts down Chastel's kitchen ops and asks her to head to the guest room, where she's more useful. At sundown, while everyone watched, Zagan tests the phonograph, and it plays soft music. Afterwards, dinner was served, and just when Chastel comments about the meal, Barbados asks what a knucklehead like hers knows about complex flavors. When Chastel wonders where that's coming from, Barbados lets it slip that Chastel has been sleeping with a stuffed animal. Just then, Zagan realizes Barbados had already emptied a bottle of wine and was in high spirits. Suddenly, Chastel accuses Barbados of peeping on her from the shadows. But when Barbados points out that she lacks the assets to keep him peeping, Zagan suddenly treats his head like a dartboard. Just then, Neffy tells Chastel that Barbados saved her when she got poisoned, so Chastel apologizes and thanks him. However, Barbados says she can reserve her thanks for when she grows bigger in the right places. Suddenly, the phonograph almost destroys everyone's eardrums, so Raphael turns it off. Afterward, Zagan asks Barbados to apologize, but he refuses. However, when he tastes the soup and complains that it tastes like poison, Valefor reveals that she served him Chastel's masterpiece. Just when Neffy asks if he's alright, Barbados gets lightheaded and passes out while Chastel freaks out. After everyone goes to bed, Neffy joins Zagan in the throne room where he fiddles with the phonograph. She then asks why he bought it, and Zagan explains that he wanted her to enjoy some good music. Just then, Neffy points out that Zagan always looked sad when he talked about his past. But when she adds that he looks different that evening, Zagan says he had no home or regular source of food while growing up. But he had friends to share bread with, so he was never lonely. However, Zagan says that since he shut himself in the castle, he has never gone back to the streets. After wondering if any of his old friends survived, Zagan asks Neffy if he could return the phonograph to the street. When she says it's fine, the phonograph plays some music and Neffy sings along to it. So Zagan asks if they could dance, and Neffy obliges. Just then, he realizes he can't dance to save his life. Fortunately for him, Raphael shows up and offers to show him some steps. The next day, the phonograph was placed in a back alley where it played music and everyone vibed to it. The previous night, after Raphael's tutorials, he picked up Valefor, who had dozed off from watching the Snoozefest, giving the lovebirds all the privacy they needed to dance to their heart's satisfaction. Which of Barbados' fooling moments is your favorite? Let's know in the comments. If you made it to the end of this video, leave a thumbs up and subscribe for more anime recaps like this.